A few weeks into the new year, the situation on the Korean Peninsula has seen worrying developments. In early January, North Korea fired artillery shells into the West Sea for 3 consecutive days. Then just last week, the reclusive state said it had successfully launched its solid-fuel hypersonic intermediate-range ballistic missile. This comes less than a month after the launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile on December 18th. Along with such provocations, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's rhetoric against South Korea has also grown notably more aggressive in recent months, designating the South an enemy state now. And with South Korean President Yoon issuing tit-for-tat rhetoric, the tensions do not appear likely to die down anytime soon. To get some expert analysis on the situation, we're joined via video call today by an esteemed guest. We have with us Ambassador Robert Gallucci, Distinguished Professor in the Practice of Diplomacy at Georgetown University. He served as the Chief U.S. Negotiator during the North Korean nuclear crisis of 1994. We bring him in now. Ambassador Gallucci, hello, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So North Korea has stepped up its military provocations with the new year. This comes amid some concerning rhetoric from the regime as well. Leader Kim Jong-un called for a constitutional amendment to define South Korea as, quote-unquote, the most hostile state. That was during a speech addressing the Supreme People's Assembly in Pyongyang last week, according to North Korean state media. During an end-of-year plenary as well, Kim said that North Korea is no longer interested in reunifying with South Korea as well. So, Ambassador, how do you assess North Korea's recent provocations amid these statements?
I think I am joining a number of my colleagues. All of us have been watching over decades. You mentioned the negotiation with the North Koreans in the early 90s that led to something called the Agreed Framework. That was 30 years ago. And we have intermittently over the last set of decades, we've witnessed the North Koreans doing various things of the kind that you noted in your introduction. Artillery barrage, testing of ballistic missiles, aggressive rhetoric. So there's a sense in which there's nothing new about this. Notwithstanding that sense, I think a lot of us, again, who have been watching North Korea over a long period of time, think there may be something different and something more troubling in what's happening lately. And I think that's because we think that the North Koreans are approaching the international situation in a different way. Their complete disinterest during the Biden administration in having any talks with the United States, their continued embrace of Beijing, but more interestingly, the more recent embrace of Moscow, and a general feeling that the North Koreans believe that they are no longer interested in normalization of relations in order to get out from under sanctions, international sanctions, or to get better behavior from their perspective on the part of the Republic of Korea and its ally, the United States, for example, tuning down our joint military exercises. What I'm saying here is that the context now is really quite different. It's worrying. The language seems to be extremely aggressive and provocative. The designation of South Korea as an enemy is new and troubling, and the North Korean constant reference to its nuclear weapons and its willingness to use them makes many of us worry that a misperception, a miscalculation could lead to a catastrophe.
I guess another worrying aspect at the moment is South Korea's response as well, hardline response. In response to Kim's recent comments, President Yoon vowed to punish North Korea with measures several-fold stronger in the event that the regime carries out a provocation against the South. What do you make of Seoul's response and the rising tensions between the two Koreas?
one can't be too surprised that there was a vigorous response from the government in Seoul to what the North Koreans said immediately prior to their reaction. So that isn't so surprising. It maybe is troubling. It doesn't reduce tensions. It only serves to jack them up, to enhance the tension. But it really suggests that point the United States and its allies and others in the international community, Japan certainly, a concerned state, need to find some way of persuading the North that the course they're currently on is not really a good one for them or for anyone else in the region. I mean, what we are concerned about here, most concerned about, I'd say, is not only a potential conflict, but one that gets out of hand, one that might become a nuclear conflict. And that happens when the North fails to understand the commitment that is included in the alliance between the United States and the Republic of Korea, between the United States and Japan, two strong bilateral alliances with nuclear guarantees that go with those alliances. Then North needs to understand that these are not to be pressed, they shouldn't be tested, and that no good will come from that.
It seems your concerns recently led you to write a commentary for the National Interest titled, "Is Diplomacy Between the US and North Korea Possible in 2024? And you wrote in that piece that we should at least entertain the thought that nuclear war could break out in Northeast Asia in 2024. That sounds like quite a stark warning. Can you elaborate on this thought for us? What sort of scenarios could lead to such a war, and why do you think we should be thinking about this at this point?
Well, I intended the warning to be stark. I intended that that is to say, the South Koreans, the Japanese, the Americans, as the allies on one side of this confrontation, be very clear with the North about the strength of our alliance and also about our interest in avoiding a conflict. One of the things that I worry about is, as I said, misperception, poor calculation, perhaps a mistake on the part of the North that they can succeed in nuclear blackmail, in intimidation, that their confidence in their own military capability, for example, you mentioned the IRBMs, intermediate range ballistic missiles, that the North Koreans recently tested, but before that they tested intercontinental range missiles that can reach the United States of America. We know that they have nuclear weapons that they talk about all the time, and they may have in their minds that they can deter an American response to an aggressive behavior by the North. That would be a miscalculation, that would be a mistake, and it could be a catastrophic one for all parties. So I issued that stark warning because I'd like us all to work to avoid miscalculation. When both states now, North and the United States, have nuclear weapons, we usually conclude that as through the long period of the Cold War, the two sides will be in something of a mutual deterrent posture. And it's been called MAD, mutual assured destruction. It is not clear to me that the North has such a capability. It is nowhere near as capable as the United States. It may have as many as 100 nuclear weapons, but the United States has more than 5,000. So this is not something that the North should be testing. It shouldn't be testing the deterrent posture of the United States, and it shouldn't be testing our ability to extend that deterrence to both of our allies in Northeast Asia, in Japan, and in the Republic of Korea. But I did intend the warning to be stark, that we need to be careful that there is not a mistake, a miscalculation a unauthorized launch of any kind.
Right, so you wanted to remind us and wake us up to the dangers that lie in this situation. But how likely do you think such a scenario could be in 2024? If not nuclear war, how do you think the situation on the peninsula will pan out this year?
Well, no one can be surprised if there are provocations from the North. What you mentioned in your opening remarks were provocations by the North. But we've seen that before. Sometimes we pass it off just as a method by which the North keeps the issue of sanctions about North Korea on the agenda of the international community. It's a way of reminding everybody of North Korea's importance and its potential for causing catastrophe. All right, that we've seen before, and it's not new. Or sometimes we would see it as the creation of a bargaining chip so that it could get into a negotiation and bargain to get a reduction in tensions from perhaps sanctions relief or some other move by the United States or its allies. But that is, I would say, in the normal course of things in Northeast Asia. That's not that unusual. We start, and we're having this discussion right now because there are different factors here in the setting in which all this is happening. And the rhetoric of the North Koreans is different, and it's more provocative, and it's more dangerous. And the context, the whole feeling that the North Koreans project, that they no longer seek normalization with the United States. The United States, from a North Korean perspective, may be a declining power in Asia. China may be a rising power in Asia. North Korea is seeking to become, as to turn a phrase, the arsenal of a dictatorship with the Russians by supplying them with certain missiles that may be useful in the Ukraine contingency that the Russians have provoked. So the setting here is different. It's more troubling. But overall, what hangs over all this, I think, is the fact that North Korea does have nuclear weapons, that North Korea is aware of the potential it might have to intimidate with its nuclear weapons. And the United States is aware of that risk. The United States extends deterrence to South Korea and to Japan. We value their non-nuclear weapon status, and we're serious about that extended deterrence. So we want the North Koreans to understand that we will not be intimidated, and nor will our allies. And it's important not to test that, because that can lead to a catastrophe.
Right, so the risk is very present, but the question then becomes, what can we do about it? Especially when, as you've mentioned, North Korea currently seems to have no interest in diplomacy with the United States or South Korea at this point. Is there anything that the US can do to prevent nuclear war? You also said in your article, in the last year of the Biden administration, with a seriously contested election in the offing, it is hard to argue that timing is right. What can the US currently do, the Biden administration currently do, to improve its relationships with North Korea?
Well, I'm not in government now. I'm an observer, like you're an observer. And I think it's a good idea to call them like we see them, as they say. And what I see now is a president in the last year of his, what I hope will be his first term as president. And that's typically in international affairs not a terrific time to start new initiatives internationally. He will be focused, and his administration will be focused on an election, as it ought to be. So it's not an ideal time to launch an initiative of some kind, whether it's in Northeast Asia, in Europe, or in the Middle East. But those three areas right now are quite troubled, which is an unnecessarily soft term, I guess, for very, very hard situations in all three regions. And you ask what can happen? I think, first of all, the United States must leave absolutely no ambiguity in the minds of the leaders in Pyongyang about the clarity and strength of our alliance with the Republic of Korea and with Japan. Those alliances are strong, they're healthy, and they should not be tested, I say, I think now for the third time. That's one thing the United States can do. Second, I think it can be clear about its willingness to engage when the North should choose it would or decide it would be in their interest. And that means by saying that we would engage, that we would value a normal relationship with North Korea. That is not to say that we would be accepting North Korean nuclear weapons and North Korea as a nuclear weapon state. But there's no reason to make the denuclearization, as we used to call it, of North Korea the first step that must be taken. I don't think we can do that, or we should. I think that should be clearly an objective of what we want in Northeast Asia. We want a denuclearized Northeast Asia, but we can do things to improve relations without addressing that as the first element in an engagement. I think there are things that still trouble the North about U.S. activity in Northeast Asia, and we could address that. There are lots of ways of improving our readiness and military readiness, improving cooperation between our two sides that the North may not find nearly as provocative. There are things that could be done, and I think in a discussion with the North, we could get into that. But the North has to be interested in that. It must believe the United States truly wants to normalize relations. And if it does come to that conclusion, then an engagement might be possible. I'm not predicting it. As a matter of fact, I'm saying it's very hard to do in an election year, but it's a worthy thing to do. And I think to put diplomacy on the table as something we would value, if it were possible, is only reasonable if we want to avoid a conflict.
And also, what would you like to see from South Korea during this time as well? What role should South Korea play at the moment?
Well, as soon as we start thinking about what engagement might look like, everybody has a role. It's hard for me to imagine serious discussions between Washington and Pyongyang in which Seoul has not taken a real position in those discussions, is not consulted very closely. It's hard for me to imagine this without including our ally, the Japanese. And I would add, while relations between Washington and Beijing have been better, to say the least, I think that consultations with the Chinese are essential if progress is going to be made with North Korea. So I think I would start really with the Republic of Korea. I'd start with Seoul. And what we'd want to do is make sure that domestic politics or other things that any democracy takes account of when it's dealing in foreign affairs, all foreign policy becomes domestic policy whenever an election is in the offing, and even when it's not. So I think consulting with South Korea to make sure that we are all on side and sort of on the same sheet of music in approaching the North, that would be a very good and essential thing. And to do that with our other ally and also with the Chinese, who are always important to North Korean calculations.
Well, you've certainly given us a lot of food for thought today, I would say, perhaps on some things that haven't been taken seriously enough by some people, I guess, but perhaps it is necessary to reassess our standings as well, especially considering the changed circumstances, as you mentioned at the start, on the peninsula. We will leave it there. We'll be speaking to Ambassador Robert Gallucci. Thank you once again for your time today.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.